a fighter, you're a lover, you're strong, and you'll recover from whatever gets you down. And there's so many, many reasons, anytime, any season is the right time to be with you. Hello, Hamtramck, you've won my heart. Your best part, Holbrook and the dark is you.
So at this moment, we're going to welcome from the chair of the Hamtramck Human Relations Commission. And by the way, the Hamtramck Human Relations Commission is the co-sponsor of this evening's event, along with National City Bank. They gave a generous donation, so thank you to National City. You all may know him as the chairman. However, Bill Meyer is a lifelong jazz musician, as you all have seen today, on the piano, ripping things up. Thank you. He's also a peace activist and justice activist, and right now he wants to share with you a few words. So please welcome Bill Meyer.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. Hey, let's give a nice round of applause since I'm a musician. Let's credit the musicians, right? They're sitting back here taking a break, but this is Spider Webb on drums. These are the Funk Brothers right there, Spider Webb. We've got the one and only Charlie Gabriel from New Orleans, his third generation. And Jerome Clark is on guitar, Jerome Clark. And my good old buddy Hubie Crawford on bass. These are some of the top musicians in the country. Yeah, it's very great musicians. And we're pleased to have them here with us today. Thank you so much for acknowledging them. And I don't know, I guess we should also say at this point, did you see our program on the back? There's a list of thank yous. Please notice all the people who helped us do this. We really appreciate everybody. We didn't want to say them all here, we put them in the book. So let's give them all a nice round of applause. All our presenters and the people who are on the program. On behalf of the Human Relations Commission, I'd like to welcome you to a rare event. This is a recognition dinner for Hamtramck African Americans. This is the first big public event for our new commission, which is at least the third attempt in Hamtramck's history to have a Human Relations Commission. Serving the mayor, the city council, and all the people of the city, we're charged with the task of improving communications and bringing people together with the goal of making life better for everyone in the city. We chose to start this series by recognizing the contributions of what we feel is probably the most underrepresented group in Hamtramck. Hamtramck is probably the most diverse city in the most diverse 2 square miles in the country. And attracted to this diversity and for many other reasons, my wife and I moved here about 8 years ago. I was actually born just down the street here, about 2 miles, so I am a legitimate Detroiter. So, for those of you who don't know that. We were unfamiliar with the race relations in this highly politicized little town of Hamtramck. But it didn't take long to notice the unbalanced media coverage and the lack of power sharing with the black community. In planning this program, I had the great opportunity to dig a little deeper into the black community in Hamtramck. Where is the African American community? Most of the 15% share of the Hamtramck population is on the conventional other side of the tracks, or freeway in this case. Was it coincidental that not only were black homes removed to make way for a freeway, but now those remaining were cut off from the mainstream of downtown city life, actually? This is no surprise given that Metro Detroit is the most segregated city in the country. 90% to 10%. I mean, that's not a claim to fame that we want to have. Where are the African American stories? Most of them are in books, soon to be written. People I talk to are writing books. We haven't seen them yet. They're in the heads and memories of longtime residents of this town. Stories passed down in backyard barbecues, on the front porches among families and friends, and at places of worship. They're not in the newspapers, or in the books on the shelves at the library, or in government documents. The library has collected one thin folder of clippings from 100 years of Black history in the city. Where are the African American leaders? No Black person has been elected to Hamtramck office since 1924, until Yvonne Meyer was elected to the school board in 2001. It's an accomplishment for her, but it's sort of a shame for the city if we had to wait that long. We now have the first Black councilperson since 1924, Mr. Hood. That's over 80 years, 80 years. There are now no Black employees in City Hall, from what I was told. Well, okay, it's not true. We'll get the correction when it comes up. There are no major Black-owned businesses in the city, and most of them are small service-type businesses. There's little Black power in the Hamtramck city government. And what do I mean by Black power? I mean, accept the equal sharing of all groups in the city to be fairly represented in making decisions that affect all of us. This is to all of our benefit, that every community has power in this government, equal right. It's enough to state the conditions and the realities on the ground, but we also have historical events to deal with that where all of us are still paying for. Like over 200 years of Black slavery that resulted in a Holocaust of 20 to 30 million deaths. The conditions that created the 1967 Detroit Rebellion that hammered a deeper wedge in our community. The recent shocking loss of the affirmative action campaign in Michigan. And these are just some of the relevant factors that still play on our social relations. Many in this room know about the R31 discrimination lawsuit filed by several African American families back in 1969. It's been over 35 years later, and the case is finally being resolved with the construction of many new homes in the city. It was Judge Damon Keith who presided over the historic case, and we invited him to be our guest for this program to bring closure to this sensitive issue. He unfortunately couldn't attend tonight, but he was very supportive and graciously offered to come to Hamtramck anytime we want him for an event to help heal the community and find ways to go on from here. So that's one of our next events for the Human Relations Commission, and we hope you all support that. But as our program will show, there is hope, and there's always hope. Studies have shown that all people, regardless of race, want pretty much the same things in life. A safe, happy life for their loved ones. A decent job, adequate health care, good education, and a nice place to live. The recent Bridging the Racial Divide series at discussions on race relations that brought together people of all colors to talk about a subject that most of us prefer to avoid, racism and racial discrimination. It was lively and friendly, an opening of hearts and minds that showed great potential for our city. Yvonne Meyer wrote and urged me after the event. She said, "Keep up the good work, please don't let this die." So that was an impetus to keep this thing going. So with the help of the Human Relations Commission and National City, who graciously gave us a donation, without their help we wouldn't have had this event. We thank them seriously. It would be nice if certain positive developments came out of this project, this dinner, this event. Maybe a room in the new Hamtramck History Museum dedicated to African Americans. That would be nice. Maybe more Black qualified leaders in positions of authority and power. That would be nice. Maybe new active, visible organizations within the Black community that fight for peace and justice for all of us. Maybe a better understanding of the contributions and sacrifices that African Americans have made to Hamtramck and the nation as a whole. We need more education about their contributions. Maybe more Black faces in the boardrooms, government offices, and agencies that service the community. Maybe a more fair sharing of the riches that this city can provide if we all work together. Just imagine the improvement in safety and security if we all began to trust each other. So you who came here tonight obviously share this vision. You're the ones that care enough to want to pay recognition or receive recognition for people who have been unfairly denied their equal and rightful position in society. You're the ones who feel this is important. Our Human Relations Commission can build on the support of each one of you who are dedicated to improving our community. We hope you enjoy the evening's program, and thank you so much for coming tonight.
We are honored to have with us this evening a woman whose leadership has inspired change in the city. Please join me in welcoming award-winning author and scholar and Hamtramck's first woman mayor, Dr. Karen Majewski.
Welcome to everyone. On behalf of the City of Hamtramck, to our Hamtramck residents, I know you'll appreciate this opportunity tonight to recognize our African American community. To those visiting our city, I hope you'll learn something about our history and come to understand something of the richness and diversity for which Hamtramck is celebrated. Hamtramck is a city that in many ways reflects the promise of the great American experiment, of a space in which people can gather from diverse backgrounds and places with different personal and collective histories, bearing different burdens and offering their own strengths. A place that promises that out of this diversity and variety can grow individual opportunity and collective spirit. This is a fine ideal and a great promise. It is a promise personified in the person of Tadeusz Kościuszko, who willed his estate, a freedom fighter in the American Revolution, who willed his estate to the cause of freeing and educating slaves before returning to Poland to fight for its own independence. Kościuszko's hopes, however, as we all know, went unfulfilled. And we know all too well that the great national promise has often been broken, and the ideal disappointed in Hamtramck as in America. But it is an ideal worth living and fighting for nonetheless. Without it, we fall apart as a community and as a nation, and we transgress against the greater spirit that guides us all. And so it falls on us every day to recognize our successes, to correct our mistakes, and to go forward on the strength of our convictions, to continue the never-ending process of perfecting this little spot of earth over which we are only inadequate caretakers. When we talk about Hamtramck's African American community, we are talking about a community that goes back to our earliest days, not just as a city, but as a township. We are talking about some of the most prominent families in Hamtramck's history, and we are talking about a community that continues to be a vital force in the Hamtramck of today. But more than that, I trust in looking around the room today that when we acknowledge the African American community, we are recognizing a people who will contribute to the shaping of tomorrow's Hamtramck, that will help us fulfill the great promise as a city that welcomes the talents and gifts of all our residents, that provides a place in which those talents can develop and flourish, and that feeds the human spirit through which we all grow as a city, as a nation, and as the children of our common God. Thank you.
And now, with a special presentation especially constructed for this evening's event, the chair of the Hamtramck Historical Commission and the person keeping the history books of a very historical city, please welcome Mr. Greg Kowalski.
It's not easy getting here from around there. Well, I want to thank you, first of all, for allowing me to do this. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about this aspect of Hamtramck's history. And as I do this, and as we put this presentation on, I want to make it clear that I am not about to tell you what was the African American experience in Hamtramck. No white person can do that. You had to live that experience to really understand it. And I'm not going to take that presumptuous, be that presumptuous to say, this is what you felt. But what I can do is show you the history and how the community fit into the history of Hamtramck and how the African American community helped mold and shape the history of Hamtramck from its earliest days, as Karen mentioned, to today. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a low-tech guy. Greg Kirshner, who's running the projector there, is a high-tech guy. And somewhere we're going to meet in the middle, and hopefully this is going to go well. And Greg, you can start with the first slide. We're going to compress this whole story into about 15 minutes, which is going to be really kind of challenging, but we're going to do it. First, we start by looking at Hamtramck as it really was originally. When Hamtramck was a township, formed in 1798, reformed in 1818, and reformed again in 1827. For the 1827 census, we know that there were about 7, quote, people of color living in the township of Hamtramck, which at that point stretched from the Detroit River to 8 Mile Road and from Woodward Avenue all the way through the Grosse Points. There weren't many people at all living here. So Hamtramck was basically a farming community, which, as you can see from this early postcard that shows the Brett Meyer farm, which was, the area was originally settled by Germans and French. And that was much of the 19th century history of Hamtramck was made up of German and French people. Over the years, the township was reduced in size as Detroit grew in the next portions of it, and eventually became the Hamtramck that we know it today. If we look a little bit closer, though, we can see that this is a rural community at that time, full of horses, farms, and not much itself. Hamtramck, as we recognize it today, really didn't exist. But by the turn of the century, Hamtramck Village was formed in 1901, and in 1910, the modern history of Hamtramck began. And that really was when the Dodge brothers opened up their factory in Hamtramck, and they started building there. The first cars rolled off the assembly line in 1914, and a variety of people started moving into town. The majority of them, the overwhelming majority of them, however, were Polish immigrants who came to work in the factory. But they weren't the only ones who did. The African American, the black population, started moving into Hamtramck as well. This led to a tumultuous times politically in the late teens and early 1920s. And what a lot of people don't realize even to this day, that as Hamtramck went through the birth pains of becoming a city in 1922 as it changed from a village, there were black prominent people who ran for office in one office. The last village council in 1921 included Mr. Ordine Tolliver. Mr. Tolliver was one of the most fascinating people who ever lived in this city. He went on, he was actually only served one term on the village council, and when it became a city, I want to just stop here and take a look at this. Go back one slide, Greg, if you can. This, Mr. Tolliver was a prominent politician, but he was a man of many talents as well. And one of the things that's so telling about this photo here is that he was a music teacher. And if you look at his classroom, all of his students were white. And this is from about 1925. It was not unusual then for white people to send their children into his trust. He was so well known, so well beloved. He was also an excellent photographer and a respected member of the community for many, many years. I happen to be a close friend of a person who was his neighbor, and he was like their grandfather. This friend of mine is white. And Mr. Tolliver, helped her parents, who had come to America from Germany in the 1940s, to become citizens. They respected him tremendously, and they actually stood up to his wedding. So if we can move on a bit. But as we go forward again, Hamtramck was changing. And this is the exterior of the Dodge main factory as it looked in 1914 when it was first opened. This was the little gateway. There are all the, which was prominent on Joseph Campo, where people would see the plant. It looks nice and quaint with its nice tile roof. The interior was quite a bit different. This was the plant itself. This is where the people worked. This was the conditions that they worked in. And while they were brutal conditions for all the people working there, it was especially hard for the African American population because they got the worst jobs. They were consigned to the foundries. They were consigned to the jobs they wouldn't give anybody else. And they had a tremendous effort. They had to put up a tremendous effort to exist and to thrive in these kind of conditions. Yet they did. And even by the 1950s, Dodge, Chrysler Corporation itself, began to recognize more the African American population and what it had done for the corporation itself. This magazine here is from about 1954, and it shows now featuring black people in the magazine, which is quite remarkable for this corporation, which did not have a great reputation for working with ethnic groups. And so, but here we see them already at least recognizing that the African Americans made a positive contribution to their company as well, and did recognize them. Another shot showing again workers, but again, even at this point in the 1950s, the black workers were consigned to the worst jobs. This is not typical, this photo where he looks relatively happy and sedate working at this kind of job. Generally, he would be working in the forge or one of the other hard working areas where he couldn't, where it was a very difficult process. If we go back a little bit and look at some of the other prominent African Americans over the years too, this is a poster from 1932. I'm sorry, 1934. Cass Bailey, you can see there, was running for city council. This is the Communist Party ticket, however, which did not fare very well in the elections, and never did, except for one person who was elected to become our first councilwoman in Hamtramck, who was supposedly a communist and never really officially admitted it. But at least you can see this particular ticket, and if we go back a bit, Greg, you can see the ticket itself, with Cass Bailey being one of the members on there. And on this is also printed the Communist Manifesto for that time. The Communist Manifesto has things on it today that we would embrace right now, in terms that people should receive equal pay for equal work regardless of their race. Women should receive equal pay, and things along those natures that we commonly accept today. And those are new concepts in the 1930s and not too well received by the majority of people. And keeping in mind that the Communist Party, while it was active in Hamtramck for many years, it was a different kind of communism that we came to know over the years. This was a communism that was more concerned about people's rights and working with to better the lives of people without getting involved in the politics and world domination and other nonsense. The churches in Hamtramck, always the black presence was always part of that too, going back to the earliest days. First Baptist Church was founded in 1907, and we have some early newspaper articles showing some of the early days of the church. The pastor of the church, and that building, that's the church today, by the way, when they moved to Trowbridge Street. However, I'm pleased to say that this is somewhat of an old picture, and it is an improved building these days. And it actually looks better now than it did then, so it's nice to know. One of the things that they did do is the owners cleaned that off, so now if you go over there, and I would advise you to take a walk or right over there, you can see where it says First Baptist Church on there now. They preserve that, which is good to see. St. Peter's AME, another long-time church in Hamtramck, established in 1917. Great presence in the city for many, many years to this day. Still functioning, still a presence in the city. We also featured as part of our walking tour when we go by there. And I think probably everybody knows Corinthian Baptist Church. And that Corinthian has been around since 1917 as well, and has drawn many, many followers, many parishioners from across the whole Detroit metro area. A landmark in Hamtramck for many, many years. There are other figures, historical figures, that we see, that we learn about over the years that I wish we actually had more information on. Byron Batchelor was the first motorcycle policeman in the city of Hamtramck. He died in 1996 at the age of 101, as I recall. So, very well known. In fact, my parents remember him, and they remember him as the guy who would kind of watch over the kids of the community, black and white kids, and kind of be the shepherd to them, and fond memories of him. But the Hamtramck Police Department and Hamtramck City officials were integrated to an extent from the earliest years. This is from about 1925, and it shows the police department, and you will see there were black officers in Hamtramck. Arthur Dillard was the first black Hamtramck police detective in the 1920s. So they made up a substantial portion of the department over the years as well. And as we go through the old newspapers and scour for information about the different ethnic groups I do come across stories about people like Arthur Dillard and some of the other prominent Hamtramckans. The schools themselves were integrated from the earliest years, and this dates from about the mid-1930s, very typical schoolroom. You can't see, unfortunately, too well on this slide. There's a little bit closer view where you can see some of the black kids in the classroom. They were mixed in with the general population. There was no real segregation in terms of school populations from the earliest years. And it was, my mother had a friend who was an African American, and it was in the 1930s, so it wasn't that unusual. And it's just, you've seen from the library, not just a regular scene from the mid-1950s, one of the library programs. And if we look a little bit north from here, does anybody recognize Conant Gardens? I think that's a treasure that we have right down the street that people don't realize. We could do a whole program on Conant Gardens. Conant Gardens is in Detroit. However, it does have a strong connection to Hamtramck, and traditionally has. The Conant Gardens is a neighborhood that's in the Nevada 7 Mile Road area that was originally founded on the land owned by Shuro Conant, who was an early Detroit businessman who was a strong, staunch abolitionist. And he was one of the few people, if not the only person, and this is in the mid-19th century, who insisted that there would be no deed restriction on his property. The deed restrictions at that time said you could not sell to anybody but a Caucasian. Which of course, that forced the black people to only live in the worst areas of town where housing was available. Because he opened up his land, and it went through his relatives, and eventually in the 1920s, Conant Gardens was founded. The African Americans, the black people, could not only buy houses, but could build houses. And they built beautiful houses. And I actually went by there yesterday, took a ride through the neighborhood, and found out that it's actually quite some beautiful houses still there. It's a little frayed around the edges, but so is Hamtramck. So it's done well for itself. But from the 1920s to the 1950s, it was a premier black community in the Metro Detroit area, home of a lot of people, a whole cross-section of people. There's a beautiful book that was done by the Conant Gardens Association a few years ago that's really worth checking into if you're interested in local history. The Sojourner Truth projects, homing projects, were built in the 1940s, as were a whole variety of housing. It's a whole variety of housing projects. This one was built in Nevada, and it was specifically constructed to bring in the Defense Department workers who moved into town. Now we're getting to the sadder side of I've talked a lot about the great contributions African Americans, some have made to the city of Hamtramck, and there are many more who have made more. When we start to get into this area, we start seeing some of the ugly side of things. This is when this housing project was a scene of riots. When black people started moving in here, the white community really fought to keep them out of here. And there was a long battle to get this integrated. And the same goes for the Hamtramck housing projects, which were built in 1941. It took until 1951 for that to be integrated. And I think a lot of people in the white community believe that for many years, the African Americans suffered in silence at the indignities and the injustice that they faced. And that's not true. They fought in many ways, and they fought legal battles that dragged on for years and years and years, and took us all the way through the court system to get their justice that they deserved, to be allowed to move into that housing project, and they won that case. It was not an easy role for the African Americans, as you all know better than I do. It was a very difficult existence. Hamtramck had a very odd kind of relationship with the African American community through the years. In many ways, it was extremely accommodating. Black people lived next to white people in many cases. We know of black people who rented their own homes to white people. They lived upstairs, the white people lived downstairs. They shared things together. They went to school together. But I bet you there's a lot of people in this room who remember the black and white fountains, soda fountains at the giant stores that were in Hamtramck, and remember the other forms of segregation that existed all through the town for many, many years. And obviously, we can't really talk about the history of the African American community without talking about the urban renewal case. This was a case that was one of the key issues that affected the city of Hamtramck to this day. From the time that Bill alluded to a bit of it earlier, this again was far more complicated than we can even cover here. But I will give you just a little bit of an overview of some things you may not know. The urban renewal program in Hamtramck actually started in the late 1940s. When after the war years, Hamtramck's housing stock was aging and getting very decrepit. In 1950, there were 45 homes in Hamtramck that did not have indoor toilets in 1950. The city was in desperate need for urban renewal. And with the assistance of the federal government through the 1950s and 1960s, an urban renewal program was begun. The idea was good. The intentions of a lot of people in that program was good. They wanted to get rid of these houses. Here we see Mayor Zach looking at one of the houses that was falling down and making plans to demolish it, and to build new homes and new buildings in Hamtramck. It was unfortunate that there were a certain number of people who got involved in that program who did not have the interests of Hamtramck involved. White Hamtramckans or black Hamtramckans, they had a focus on greed, which basically all it amounted to. They didn't care if black people lived in Hamtramck because they wanted to leave Hamtramck, and they were going to do anything in their power to do that. We're still living with the results of that to this day. We've made a lot of progress since then. We've come forward in 1963, the Hamtramck branch of the NAACP was chartered, still active today, of course. Here we see a photo with Mayor Kowalski and John Wells and Juanita Ford, who I'm sure some of you remember still. Getting a little bit closer. And here's shortly after they were chartered, here's a march that took place down on Joseph Campo in 1963, showing the branch over by a March for Justice by the park. But we like to leave on a good note as well. Bea Adamski retired from the public library several years ago, and as you can see, she touched the lives of a lot of people, black and white, and did a lot of good in the city and helped promote a spirit of cooperation and justice for everybody in the city. There are a few other people that we have to, there's a few other people that we have to mention before we can go on with this. Iris Butler was well known as Hamtramck's Angel of Mercy for working with the city's health department from 1918 to 1918 to 1964, an incredible span of time. Not 200 years, but still a pretty long span of time. And I was just reading, literally the other day, I came across a story in The Citizen, because one of the things I do is I go through the old newspapers page by page. And when I find an interesting story about an interesting person, I copy that story down for our archives. We have some fairly extensive archives on the African American community. And I came across the story of her retirement in 1964 and a party that was thrown in her honor. And it was a beautiful story for everybody who participated and paid tribute to her for all she had done for the city for so many years. Dr. Haley Bell was well known in Hamtramck. He founded, in addition to being a doctor, he founded WCHB AM radio and WCHD FM radio, and his offices were in Joseph Campo. Again, a man who had many white patients as well as African Americans. I bet nobody remembers Maurice Strickland. Maurice, do you remember? Yeah, excellent. Maurice Strickland. Maurice Strickland was appointed to the Hamtramck Housing Commission in 1950. So, but all right, this one you're not going to remember, because I found an article about a teen gang that was rampaging through Hamtramck, and the thing about it is that it consisted of black and white kids working together in the spirit of cooperation to rob people. So, that may not be the greatest example of integration, but I'm sure it says something. So, we have come a long ways. There is a long ways to go from a historical perspective. We see, at least today, we recognize that all the groups in Hamtramck contribute to the city and deserve to be a part of the city's history. And I want to assure all of you that the Hamtramck Historical Commission is diligently collecting information and preserving information about every ethnic group in this city, including the African American group residents, and every other residence as well. We want to make sure that this history of everybody is preserved in a fitting manner for the future. And as I do conclude, I do want to read a line to you from Ordine Tolliver, who we talked about earlier. This was a line he wrote when he won the election in March 1921. And Hamtramck was a village, and he said, "What the village of Hamtramck needs is a close cooperation of all groups which make up our population, working for the benefit of all." That was in 1921. He could have written that yesterday. Thank you.
At this moment, we are going to jump to the present history. And kicking off the present history, we have Ahmed El-Amari, who is the Assistant Chair of the Hamtramck Human Relations Commission. He will come and discuss the Hamtramck area businesses.
Good evening. We are now going to bring us back to the present time to recognize contemporary Hamtramck African American who have been notable in the areas such as business, religion, sports, and public service. In our search for Black-owned business in Hamtramck, we come up with about a dozen. This is small relative to the percentage of Black in the community, but more than most knew existed. The oldest Black business in Hamtramck is the dentist office of Dr. Pass and Dr. Rogers at 9521 Joseph Campbell, near Poland Street. Some of you may remember the long walk up two long flights of stairs, then stepping into a beautiful Art Deco lobby that has not changed in a decades. Dr. Haley Bill opened this business in 1928 and remained there until 1954, when his son-in-law, Dr. Robert Pass, took over. Dr. Pass was joined in 1972 by Dr. Rogers and retired a couple years ago after 51 years of working in the same building. Here are the two youthful and healthy dentists. Remember, they walk those two flights of stairs almost every day. The founder, Dr. Haley Bills, was also the one who started the Bill broadcasting system WCHB AM and WCHD FM. A husband and wife team share office at 11612 Joseph Campbell. Pipes Insurance and owned by Alexandra Williams, who started in the insurance business in 1984 and moved here in 1998. Her husband, George Williams, started in the business in 1990. It's not true? And opened J.W. Williams Associates, provided tax services in the same building since the year 2000. Is that true? If you have any comments, we would take it. Bill will take it later. Gaston and Associate is an insurance company at 3129 Kenneth, run by Williams Gaston. He moved here from Detroit in 1991, attracted to his ideal location in a busy street. He handles some home, auto, and life insurance, and also does real estate. The new totally renovated Zed's Lawn is located at the corner of Bustford and Fleming and opened last year on August 18, 2006. One of the owners is Henry Williams, who also works in Hamtramck, who always have worked for the State Gaming Control Board. He says his family always shopped in Hamtramck and had good experience, so he chose this city for first business venture. The other co-owner is James Johnson, who also works as a system manager for the Detroit 911 Center. Here they both host two special guests, Detroit Councilperson Martha Reaver and Albert Tennessee Talby. And excuse my pronunciation about the names, I'm a second language speaker. Dollar Store Clothing Plus, Loris at 9515 Joseph Cambo, near Poland, next to the oldest black business in Hamtramck. They opened last year in 2006. The owner is Velina Dockery, who is also a pastor for an end-time Revelist church, which operate in the same building. The mission passes out bread and free food and clothing to needy folks every Tuesday. Mama Dear Cafe, on the corner of Kenneth and Lumpkin, has been attempting to open the last year or so, going through the hundreds of meeting regulations. In the meantime, owner and caterer Corliss Arshid has run her famous soul food cooking out of Southern Ireland across the street. Corliss has provided the wonderful food and catering this evening. So you like it, right? We hope to visit her in her new establishment very soon. I'll be your first customer. In 2003, this young woman came from Senegal, Africa, and opened her first business in Hamtramck. Sophia African Bradley is where she spent her craft next to Little Caesar on Joseph Campbell. Sophia is showing here with her young daughter Fatua. She is learning the ways of Hamtramck business quickly, but is confused about certain rules and regulations, like everybody else. For example, about signing in her windows, she says her friends who have a business in Detroit do not have these problems. What's going on, man? Another busy hair salons of different style is located at 2727 kind of across from St. Lot's. Envy Hair Salons is owned by Tanya, who named the salon after her daughter, Envy. Tanya, who has been in this business for 20 years, came to Hamtramck in 2003, attracted by this diversity in our community, which is true. We have 20 out-speaking language. Miss Action, another hair salon at 3004 Kenneth next to the Citizen Office block, is also a black-owned business, but apparently on vacation since we have been unable to contact the owner for quite a while. That's Bill. Coats and Stuff and Kenneth at Brombach is owned by Terrell. He has been waiting for several months to open his new barber shop. Sands Party Store, Trotbridge at Buffalo, was opened just a few months ago. The only black-owned party store in Hamtramck is owned by Henry Sands and his mother, Caroline. Hopefully next step will be gas stations. The newest black business in Hamtramck is Dairy Hands Car Wash on the corner of Kenneth and Maron. The young owner, Andy Durham, took over the building 2 months ago from his brother, Derek, who ran Kenneth Auto Service at the same location for over 17 years. Derek moved his auto repair business up Joseph Campbell, now called Kenneth Be Quiet. It's also a muffler shop just outside of the Hamtramck, but family have been long-time residents of the city. Andy was born here and lived here until high school. He is now back in town with a new business, a brightly painted building that represents the pride and excitement of a new ownership. It takes a lot of work and risk in this difficult economic times to start and maintain a business. These black businesses, although few, represented a long span of time, and we would like to recognize their effort and contribution to our business community. We would like, with the black business owners who are in our audience tonight, please stand. Let's give them all a nice round of applause and recognition. Thank you, and we hope to see you all and more.
And next we will have Megan Slappy with a presentation on African American faith community and churches.
Hamtramck has had a long, rich history of churches and lodges, now joined by several mosques. The Black Church has provided a home and safe haven to many families over the years, serving as a comfort zone and a place of celebration and worship. St. Peter AME Zion Church at the corner of Yeamans and Cherish is the oldest black church in Hamtramck. It would celebrate its 97 years this November. It is now led by Pastor Michael Nelson, who assumed the role just 1 year ago, following a long line of well-known pastors. Pastor Nelson, with his rich baritone voice and pastoral skills, came from St. Paul Church in Detroit. The largest black congregation in Hamtramck, with 1,800 members, is the Corinthian Baptist Church at 1725 Kniff. It is also the second oldest church in Hamtramck, built in 1917. The church is celebrating its 90th year. It has grown so fast and large, they've moved their bookstore to the large annex building on the corner of I-75. Reverend Dr. Joseph R. Jordan is the current pastor, and he has been with the church for 34 years. His wife, Bobby Drake Jordan, was born in and grew up in Hamtramck. He is the president of the Grand Haven Dyer DeQuinder Corporation, one of the two groups ordered by the courts to deal with the resolving of the R31 discrimination lawsuit. Reverend Jordan was also president of the Council of Baptist Pastors of Detroit and vicinity from 2002 until 2005. The tall red building at 2935 Yeamans, across from Polonia Restaurant, is the Pentecostal Bible Way Church. Pastor Willie J. Wilson, a member of the church since 1962, assumed the role of pastor in 1998. He was preceded by his father-in-law, Bishop Richard Crockett, who brought the church to Hamtramck in 1965. Bishop Crockett also worked for Shore Chevrolet and had a popular radio show on WMUC. He was appointed to the Hamtramck Human Relations Commission in 1976 for a 3-year term. Here is Bishop Crockett and his wife Annie from that same year. Annie is still a member of the church and in addition is the church organist. Victoria Christian Center Church is located at Belmont, Buffalo. It is led by Pastor Jesse Rice, who became pastor in 1998. The location used to lodge the Macedonian Baptist Church that was headed by the well-known Reverend Charles Twyman for many years. Pastor Rice and his church was previously in Detroit on West Warren Street. The newest church in one of the oldest buildings in town is the International Beginning Ministries at 2385 Grayling in the south part of Hamtramck. Bishop A. Barnes moved here 2 years ago from his church on Michigan Avenue in Detroit. His new church once housed the Church of God in Christ. Bishop Barnes takes the activist role in the community as a member of the Weed and Seed program. He's also on the board of People's Community Services and can often be found at the city council meetings. He's impressed with the new city administration and feels hopeful for the future of Hamtramck. Composite Lodge number 17, that now sits at 2054 Kniff, once existed in a two-story home on Trowbridge. It has been moved to DeQuinder and Kniff, where in 1968, during the construction of I-75, was moved from DeQuinder to its present location. Willie Bill Reedon, the Wishful Master, who has been a member since 1955, has managed this building, a popular location for many Black events, since its beginning. The churches we mentioned have supported this project of recognizing the accomplishments of our African American community, sensing the need to bring the community together in a spiritual manner, and they deserve our applause for the services they've provided for our community. Would our pastors and church representatives please stand for recognition?
And now we will hear from Latrello Seepers, who will give a presentation on the contributions of African Americans in sports. Latrello.
Good evening. Hamtramck has long been known for its great athletes, many of whom have been African Americans. Athletics is a great playing field where races are won and where races unite in a common cause. The Hamtramck Recreation Building houses an impressive photo display of athletes who have excelled in their sports. Some of the African American football honorees in the Hall of Fame include Dr. James B. McMillan, 1936 12-letter winner in football and track. Horace Coleman, 1939. Dr. Julius Franks Jr., 1940, who went on to become a local dentist. Charles B. Scott, 1949, football and track. He was the 2003 E.M. Conklin Humanitarian Award winner. Dr. Thomas Mason, 1951, who played for the Toronto Argonauts, the 2000 E.M. Conklin Humanitarian Award winner. Dr. Richard Vaughn, 1952. Gerald Brown, 1954. Thomas G. Faribi, 1955, the 2006 E.M. Conklin Humanitarian Award winner. Willie Fleming, 1957. Our current councilman, William Hood, remembers Fleming playing against another Hamtramck football star, Lavelle Coleman, in the Canadian Football League playoffs, and Dewey Lincoln, 1960. Some of the African American basketball honorees in the Hall of Fame include M.O. Jones, 1945, leading scorer in basketball. John Brisker, 1965. Arthur Reed, 1959, basketball and track. He was part of the Hamtramck team that went to the state championship playoffs in 1959. Ronald Richards, who was an all-time leading scorer in 1974. Multi-skilled Spencer Scott, a 1956 graduate, earned 12-letter in baseball, basketball, and football. He later played for the Chicago Cubs. Clarence Duke Harris had a spectacular boxing career and served in the service. His professional boxing career started in 1953, and he was the welterweight champion in many competitions. He was honored in Hamtramck with Duke Harris Day to commemorate his first bout in Keyworth Stadium. He worked for years as an engineer at radio station WCHB and WGPR, and currently is involved in teaching youth about AM radio. He is in our audience today. Please stand up, Duke. Ike Blessed was an all-state 4-letterman at Hamtramck High School. He was on the Detroit Tiger team in 1967 and played with the team in 1972 World Series in Oakland. He has continued in the sports and lives in Mexico for 20 years, playing baseball. He wants to take notice of all black athletes in the Recreation Building Hall of Fame, and realized this is just from a small city of only 2 square miles. He also wants to make note that in 1967, there were 30% blacks in professional sports. Now the number is down to 8%.
Everyone shops here and sustains the businesses, churches, and agencies. All pay taxes, enrich the culture, participate in Hamtramck activities, and provide support and security to their families and neighbors. Some, of course, have been highly active for most of their lives here in this town. We could write an entire volume about some of these people, but we've limited it to just a few minutes, a few valuable minutes, that is.
And actually, three of the most active women in Hamtramck, live just a few houses apart on Eveline Street. This is a great honor, actually. This is a great honor. Vera Burke has been the president of the Hamtramck Block Club Association for 20 years. A former city inspector with the Housing Code Department for 5 years, a former Human Relations Commissioner, and previously on the board of the People's Community Services for 9 years. Vera's lived for 79 years at this house on Eveline Street. She's currently the president of the Hamtramck Community Development Corporation, which built 9 new homes and 11 rehabs. She's also a member of the Grand Haven Dyer DeQuinder Corporation. Vera Burke. Also an honor, Miss Beatrice Woods is well known in town. She's a member of the Holbrook Joseph Campo Corporation, the Canvas Board, former member of the Charter Commission. She was born on Joseph Campo 82 years ago in 1925. 17 years later, she married Howard Winslow Woods, who was born on Yeaman Street. Both of them have been active in the Republican Party. Ms. Woods has collected many mementos from her trips to Washington, D.C. for inaugural balls and other functions. She was a state committee member for 2 terms and a precinct delegate for 20 years. They brought President Reagan to Hamtramck in 1980. Howard was appointed by President Reagan to the National Advisory Council for Small Business Administration and appointed to the Economic Development Council, appointed for Economic Development Chairman for Hamtramck. Both of them won the Frederick Douglass Pioneer Award. Howard got the money to build the Senior Plaza. They were married for 57 years when Howard died in 1999. Ms. Woods has lived on Eveline Street for 50 years. There must be something in the water on Eveline Street, because also on Eveline Street is a young woman by the name of Yvonne Myrick. This is a list of accomplishments so long we don't even know where to begin. But most significantly, she's the vice president of the Hamtramck School Board. When she was elected in 2001 to the school board, she became the first African American woman elected in Hamtramck history. She's currently the vice president of the library board, a member of the Holbrook Joseph Campo Corporation, and board of directors of People's Community Services for 34 years. Ms. Myrick retired in 1990 from the Hamtramck Department of Public Works. She worked for 9 different city departments. 9 different city departments. Let's see, the assessor's office, the controller's office, the housing office, urban renewal. She was named to Who's Who in the Midwest and designated as the NAACP Unsung Heroine, one of 200 selected nationally. She received the Outstanding Alumni Award from the Wayne County Community College. The Hamtramck Senior Daytime Center was renamed in 1990 to the Myrick Perry Facility, named after another legendary activist, Ida Perry. Ms. Myrick was the former president of Ask Me Local 666 and the Hamtramck NAACP. Along with Ida Perry and Amanda Dumas, she founded Concerned Women for Hamtramck. That's only part of the story. She also planted the seeds for this event tonight, which she unfortunately is unable to attend. Her family is treating her to a well-deserved vacation.
Is Ms. Myrick out there in the audience anywhere? Oh, unfortunately. Fantastic person. Fantastic person. Juanita Gregory Harvey has lived on Yemen Street for 83 years. 83 years. She's a wealth of information, having been active through all of those years. She was on the first beautification commission in the 70s. She is active with a World War II women's group called Blue Star Mothers. Also a longtime activist with the Housewives Economy Club that started in 1925 and still meets today. She was the president of the first block club, get this, first block club in Michigan on Yemen's from 1959 through 1985. Both her and her mother, Tenny H. Gregory, were piano and organ teachers. Ms. Harvey lives in an area once called Ducktown. She explains for the reason that there used to be ducks swimming around in a pond, or actually a creek, that went down Yemen all the way from the train tracks to City Hall. Gussie Dumas Stallworth was born in and lived most of her life in Hamtramck, first on DeQuinder and then on Yemen. She served on the Grand Haven Dyer DeQuinder Corporation. Her mother, Amanda Dumas, is a key figure in Hamtramck history, having been one of the plaintiffs in our 31 discrimination lawsuit. Her mother worked for the school board, but Gussie says she lost her job for 10 years as a result of being part of the lawsuit. They were both on the Historical Commission and Gussie also on the Human Relations Commission. She also worked in the City Hall Income Tax Department. Gussie Stallworth was fond of her childhood memories with her Polish friends. She said she didn't sense any racism until she graduated from high school. And then later, as a result of our 31 lawsuit, in honor of her mother, June 3rd and June 8th have been declared Amanda Dumas Day in Hamtramck.
This is a great honor too. Ms. Simona Smith, she's the founder and president of 4 years of SWEET, the Sensational Women Emerging and Enduring Together. She lived in Hamtramck for 40 years and worked in the schools as a paraprofessional for 9 years. Simona is an executive board member of the NAACP and a former member of the Human Relations Commission. Her father, Wilbert Smith, also known as Smitty, or, and please forgive me, Baba Pamoja? Is that right? Was also very active in the community with groups such as the New Detroit, Metro East Drug Treatment Corporation, Hamtramck Black Concerned Citizens, People Acting for Change Together, and Blacks Against Racism, to name just a few. And Simona carries on the tradition. Simona Smith. Ms. Juanita Seifers, she worked in the Hamtramck schools as a paraprofessional for 22 years. She was also a former member of the Human Relations Commission from 1998 to 1999. She moved here in 1966 with her husband, James. James, also a well-known civil rights activist with the NAACP, and played a prominent role in Hamtramck politics. Their son, who we've already met, doing the sports, Mr. Latrello Seifers, was born and lived in Hamtramck all his life on Trowbridge Street. That's his graduation photo right there, actually. Look at him. Latrello was taking over in his father's shoes. Yeah, it's Hamtramck High School graduation. Look at that. What a good-looking guy. He took over his father's shoes. Unfortunately, his father passed away in 1998 at the grand old age of 96. Yeah, he was active up until his last days.
William Hood Jr. Mr. Hood, is the first elected black council person since city physician Dr. J.L. Henderson was elected way back in 1924. That's more than 80 years. 80 years. Mr. Hood is currently assigned to the Holbrook Joseph Campo Corporation, but was a former member of the Grand Haven Dyer DeQuinder Corporation from 2000 to 2002. He also was a former Human Relations Commissioner. How about that? From 1996 to 1999, and chairman since 2000 of the Wayne Metropolitan Community Action Agency. Mr. Hood moved here with his family in 1952 and later suffered through the Detroit Rebellion of 1967 when his sister and ex-wife were shot. And his 4-year-old niece was also tragically shot and killed while they were seeking refuge in a home on 12th Street. Mr. Hood has been a determined activist for many years with strong feelings and ideas about how this city should survive. Mr. Hood, I think at that point in time I was living on 14th, so I salute you. Willie D. Coleman was the first black uniformed sergeant in the Hamtramck Police Department. He was born here and lived his entire life in Hamtramck. When he started in the police department in 1950, there were 13 black officers. When he retired in 1970, there were 6. He had become sergeant in 1961 and almost made lieutenant when he retired in 1970. Since retiring, he has worked as a teacher for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. He has 2 daughters and a son who also followed in their father's footsteps as police officers. Chuck Watson has been with the Recreation Department for 7 years. President for 3 years and has lived in Hamtramck all of his life. He was a firefighter for 29 and a half years and retired in 2006 as lieutenant. His father, John Watson, was a Hamtramck police officer for 22 years and retired in 1978. His grandparents moved to Hamtramck in the 20s, and his great-grandfather founded the Macedonian Church in Hamtramck.
What we've attempted to do is recognize some of the African Americans who contributed to this community, but there are so many more. Just a few of those. Other African Americans deserving recognition include 3 who now serve on the Human Relations Commission and helped with this program. Renee Farber, she also serves on the library board. Mr. Al-Aziz is also the Citizens District Councilman for the City of Detroit. Thanks, sir. And my pleasure. And Ms. Slappy, Megan Slappy. who mentioned the fact that her grandfather had a grocery store on Yemen and Buffalo. Wesley Slappy is featured in this article right here. That's an article from 1917. Yeah, and it says, and you've got to check this out. It says, he's a very successful grocer who's been in the business for 25 years. So if you do your math, that's from 1917, and he's been doing business for 25 years. So that's pretty incredible. That's Mr. Slappy. Mr. Titus Walters, he was elected to the school board in 2004, became president this year. He's resided in Hamtramck for 34 years and is employed and active in the school system as a custodian, then a substitute teacher, and now on the school board. Titus has been going through some serious physical problems, and we send him our prayers and our best wishes for a speedy recovery. Mr. Craig Daniels. There he is. Has served for 2 years as the chair of the Recreation Department. Mr. Isaac Reeves, who is Juanita Seifer's brother. He was appointed in 2006 to the Housing Commission. He's lived here for over 20 years and served as a warrant officer from 1991 to 2002.
There are other notable Hamtramckans who were unavailable for interviews and or photos. Juanita Ford, 32 years on the board of Wayne County Community College and ran for mayor in 1975. She was president for 12 years, 1975 to 1986 of the Hamtramck NAACP. Charlene Sloan, who's the current president of the NAACP and member of the Grand Haven Dyer DeQuinder Corporation. Carrie Gray from American Axle, who was appointed to the Downtown Development Authority. And Celeste Sawyer, a member of the Grand Haven Dyer DeQuinder Corporation, of whom we were unable to contact up to this point.
First of all, I must say that I am so honored to be here. I'm sitting in my chair just sticking out my chest because the African American community is shown just so much dignity and pride and growth, and I feel honored and I'm glad to be a part of this, and I thank you. I'm going to sing Old Man River, and first I have to say that Robeson changed the words to make it suitable for the struggle that we all have gone through. And we welcome this opportunity. There's been much speaking, so I'm going to go ahead and sing the song. There's an old man called the Mississippi. There's an old man I don't like to be. What does he care if the world got troubles? What does he care if a man ain't free? Old Man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keep rolling, keeps on rolling along. He don't plant potatoes, he don't plant cotton.
Augustus Williamson with a classic song from Showboat. Paul Robeson's a big hit. He was an actor. That was the true Renaissance man, Paul Robeson. He did everything. He was a lawyer. He knew like 10 languages fluently. Was an actor. Just on and on. Many, many great things. Paul Robeson. Thank you. We are very fortunate to have in the audience tonight, and we mentioned earlier Senator Martha Scott, and I wondered if you'd like to hear from two people, Martha Scott and JoAnn Watson. It would be nice to hear from them before we all go home. Would that be nice? Martha Scott is from the Hamtramck area. She's our senator, and she's got many memories of this community. Welcome, Senator Scott.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin. Good evening, everyone. I know the night is long, so I'll be very quick. But let me just commend this commission. This was awesome. And for our first time, this was just wonderful. And congratulations to all that was a part of this. My memories go back to Hamtramck before I even knew there was a Highland Park. Because when my family came from the South, I was fortunate enough to represent the large area where I grew up at. They mentioned Coney Gardens. I was right there. That's where my family came when we first came here. And then we had some friends here, my parents' friends that had came from the South also, the Hawthorns, and they lived on Belmont Street. And I used to love to go there because there was an ice cream place close by. And we all had our own half pint of ice cream whenever we came over there. So that was just wonderful. And then after we moved to Highland Park, then my mother always shopped over here in Hamtramck. And it was just an honor to be able to go into the parish shop. You know, that's where I got my Sunday clothes at, from the parish shop. So it was just wonderful. And then I started representing the city when I was a commissioner back in the very late 70s. And I remember Mayor Kowalski was the mayor at the time. And I remember they had, the mayor had a day right at the park, right in front of City Hall there. And I remember coming over there, and our PR person from the county brought me over there. And Mayor Kowalski, every time I try to get close to him, he'd run away. And then I said to him, I caught up with him, I said, "It won't rub off on you, Mr. Mayor." And he just laughed, you know. But later we became very good friends, and I remember going to his funeral when he passed away. And in fact, his family had married into the black race. And so that's just how things work over the years, you know. But anyway, it's always a pleasure to be here. We bought our groceries over here because my mother said they had the very freshest meat and foods over here. So we shopped and just walked back across the railroad tracks to Highland Park. So I've truly enjoyed all the years that I have served Hamtramck and still do so. So it's just a pleasure to be here this evening and to really the food was awesome too. Let me just say that. That was so good. But anyway, it's been a pleasure to be here. And now, Councilwoman Watson.
Giving God the praise. God alone is worthy to be praised. Thank God. So we're going to give honor to Bill Meyer and the Human Relations Commission of the City of Hamtramck, where my big mama lived. So I spent much time in Hamtramck. Sobieski and Monard, and we had punchkis before it became popular around the whole area, but around the nation. I want to certainly give honor to my sister, the great Senator Martha Scott, who is always on time and on target for our people. Superb representative of Hamtramck, Highland Park, Detroit, and all people everywhere. She always goes to work and she always stands up. You don't have to wonder where she doesn't put her finger up in there to try to figure out which way the wind is blowing. I just love the Honorable Martha Scott. I just came by here to support my good friend Bill. And also, actually, I just left the congressman. I knew he was on the program here, but he's being honored right now. This is the 30th anniversary of Roots. Alice Haley's Roots of Many series. And there's a huge event at the Dr. Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. A congressman knew that he was going to be one of the greeters, along with the Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick and President Kenneth Cockle and the whole line of other greeters. And Alice Haley's whole family is there tonight. The congressman did not know he was one of the honorees. So after he bought greetings, they led him back to the front row so he could be among those who would receive recognition this evening. So I left him there. He didn't assign me to come and give me. I'm just telling you. I'm here because Bill Meyer called me on Sunday and said, you gotta come. And I said, well, I got 3 other things, but he said, you gotta come. So I'm here. I want to just thank you for honoring the achievements of people of African descent. To be honest, we need to recognize not only people of African descent, but it's a wonderful thing when the accomplishments of all people get acknowledged all the time, everywhere. We shouldn't have to take Polish American history to learn about the accomplishments of Copernicus. Nicholas Copernicus, who was the astronomer of note in the world, the greatest astronomer who ever lived. I happened to have studied him. He was my favorite astronomer, so I studied Copernicus when I was at the University of Michigan. I found that I did better with that independent study on astronomy. I did better independent study than I did in the astronomy class, because you can't talk in class. Obviously I like to talk, so I know more about Nicholas Copernicus than most people walking around, including his family members and astronomy. But I also believe that we, as a people, do better when we know each other's history. You know, I'm blessed to have 4 children and 35 godchildren. I didn't plan on having 35 godchildren, but I've been the director of the NAACP, director of the YWCA, worked for Congressman Conyers for 7 years before I was on the city council. So when you do all that kind of stuff, you pick up young people, you mentor young people as you go along. So my godchildren include Italian American, Polish American, I've got Latinos, I've got 1 German, and 3 who don't do anything their mothers say, but they listen to Mama JoAnn. Mama and Daddy can't tell them nothing, but they mind me. So something about eldest children. I'm the eldest of 10. When I grew up in and around Hamtramck with my big mama, we learned something about hard work. One of the reasons I work so hard at the city council, I always vote no on the recesses. They laugh at me. I vote no on recess because I like to work. But we learned how to work ethic. Learned it from my grandparents, learned it from the neighbors. We learned how to work. We cleaned, we worked in our own neighborhood, worked in the house, worked outside the house. We kept things clean. We also learned to take orders from our elders. There's something about those who are taught to respect their elders when they're young. You don't lose that. So I take care of elders right now at the city council. So we need to help our young people respect their elders. Because if you talk that young, it'll never depart from the path, so says the word. And we need to reclaim our community, reclaim our values, reclaim our country. Buy from ourselves, support ourselves, stop making other folk rich, and take care of our babies. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words tonight. And whether you have Congressman Conyers speaking or not, if you ever want somebody who can tell you the whole story of the Honorable John Conyers Jr., it's me. He's going to get the Spring Iron Medal from the National NAACP. In just 2 weeks, the National NAACP is having his convention down at Cobo. He's going to be honored because he's the only politician who was ever recommended, ever endorsed by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the only one. He's the one who introduced the federal holiday bill for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He's the one who introduced Reverend Jesse Jackson to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King didn't know Jesse Jackson until John Conyers introduced him. It was John Conyers who gave a salary to Mother Rosa Parks for almost 25 years, but she got chased out of Montgomery, Alabama. He paid her. He paid her when she and her husband were left with no money, no jobs, because they stood on the front line of the struggle. He is an humble, modest, hard-working, 7-day-a-week person who never says no to his community, and it's such an honor to not only be here to just say a few words about him, but to recognize a man who has given his life for this community. So I thank you for celebrating African American.
No, thanks to all of you for being here before we go. And I know it's been a long evening. It's been sort of hot in here. But you are the special people. Thank you for being here. There's one thing that in the long program we tried to edit people's stories. There was a lot of stuff to say about a lot of people, but we kept them short. You'll get the whole story, I'm sure, later at the Historical Museum. There was one thing, Mrs. Woods is a modest person who likes to make it known that her husband did a lot of great things, but she did a lot of great things too. But one thing we didn't fit in her little short bio, which we had to cut down to about 5% of what we knew about them, is a famous thing that Howard Woods did. He helped bring development to Hamtramck, a $35 million development project in 1980. And here's a very famous photo of Mayor Coleman Young with Howard Woods together here, and we honor him for that. That was right here in this room. In this room here? Wow, great. This was the Polish Century Club at the time, wasn't it? Yes. Okay, and once again, we just can't thank you enough for sticking around till the end here, for sure, because it's very hot, and this was a long show, but we started it, and we did it, and this was the first program for the Human Relations Commission. So thank you, we're on our way, and I want to thank so much to our MC tonight, Rasheda Williams. Let's give her a nice round of applause. Great job she did. She's got something to say.
Wow, thank you, Bill. Well, we hope everyone was touched, moved, and inspired by this evening's program. We want to thank you so much for coming out and for honoring and appreciating the accomplishments of African Americans in this wonderful community. We would like to thank the Hamtramck Human Relations Commission and National City Bank for sponsoring this evening's event. So one more round of applause to the bank and to the commission. And this event is a series of events that the commission wants to give to honor the contributions of diverse communities. So we thank the commission for that. We hope that you will carry on the hopes expressed by those in this evening's program. So until we meet again, I would like to say good night and go home safely, and just rejoice in the fact that we're able to come together on such a positive note. And let's keep up the positivity and the positive energy in this community, and let's go out and make this part of our world.
And you'll recover from whatever gets you down.